the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Podge from the two-man power trip of wrestling. Of course, joining me is my co-host, the wizard himself, Mr. Lavi Margolin. Lavi, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. A very special day, a unique podcast today. Actually, our first double guest because they are the dream team, the creative dream team. Welcoming Leo Chu and Eric Garcia, who developed Disney's Ultraviolet and Black Scorpion, but so much more than that. Welcome, Eric and Leo.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So we'll start off with Leo, and then we'll go to Eric too, just so we don't have any confusion of going back and forth. Have you both answer at the same time? So, where'd you guys grow up, and were you wrestling fans? That always to me, it's always like if you grew up in New York, you're probably a WWF fan. So, where did you grow up, and were you wrestling fans?
I grew up in Northern California in a small university town called Davis. There's like a UC there, and I was a wrestling fan. I will say, my little brother, was the huge wrestling fan. So I basically watched all the wrestling with him because he was like super, super into it. When we were kids, I would say we were more sort of WWE, Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper era type kids, sort of that great sort of golden age of it. And I got introduced to kind of lucha libre wrestling sort of through my dad's friends in the area. My Uncle Jesse in particular, who was more like a family friend than like a blood uncle. But yeah, that's kind of how I got introduced to it. And we ended up collecting a lot of wrestling stuff, and we had a lot of action figures and little cards, like player or wrestler cards that were kind of popular at the time.
If you still have those figures, they might be worth some money.
You know what? They're at my mom's house. I sure hope she still has them. I have to find them. I was just there for Mother's Day.
Things are actually immaculately preserved up there. I think that there's good Star Wars stuff. There's great stuff there.
Well, we did not have a lot of money growing up. So whenever we got something, we were very, very precious with it. And we kept all the original packaging. And after we played with stuff, we put things back. So if it's there, it's all in the original packaging in a box somewhere in the garage.
How about you, Eric? Where did you kind of grow up, and were you a big wrestling fan?
I'm a proud son of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. However, wrestling was not that. I was aware of it, but it wasn't really a big thing, believe it or not, in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, or at least in my group. Definitely when I went to college in the center of the state. The eastern side of the state in Jersey and all that kind of stuff had a lot more fans. From my perspective, but. It wasn't something that I was just aware of it, but it's not something that we watched a lot of.
So basically thinking if you like the business, you know what I mean? Like if you're a fan of the business, do you want to work on something for wrestling? So let's go back to Leo. How do you kind of get involved or think of the concept, or how does this kind of thing really maturate, if you will?
Oh, how does a project like this come about?
Yes. Yep.
Well, I would say this one was actually pretty unique because the project, the original origins of it actually came through Disney, and Disney was looking for showrunners on the project, right? And when we started getting involved in it, there was a different lead attached to the project, Blue Demon, who's like a very, very famous, huge lucha libre star.
Yep.
Blue Demon Jr.
Yeah, exactly. Blue Demon Jr. I should make it clear. Yes, was attached to the project. And then as we got involved in it, some things happened. He had to leave the project. Disney wanted a lot of changes. We redeveloped the whole thing, and then ended up kind of finding this real blend sort of between lucha libre and superhero, and just finding what the parallels of that is, and just sort of culturally and language wise, so as a story language and also as a visual language, how there were a lot of overlaps, and sort of kind of building it out that way. But we knew at the core of it, because it was a Disney project, based on everything that we do, we always like things to be very elevated. We always have this horrible phrase, which is we want things to be best in class, right? So it's if we're going to make a family show for Disney, we want it to be the best it can be. And so that means it's 4-quadrant viewing, which means the kids can watch it with the parents. It's not going to be annoying to parents when they watch it. It's something that they're invested in. So there are adult characters, there's kids characters. But at the core of it, it's a coming of age story about this girl who gets a magical lucha libre mask and the relationship she develops with her estranged uncle.
Eric, as far as like getting this thing together, getting the concept together, I know Blue Demon Jr. obviously was originally supposed to be part of it, but how do you kind of shape it, change it, and make it your own?
Well, that's a big question. I mean, I think you always have to dig it, like what Leo was saying about how we approach our work in the best in class kind of thing. And that's really just in our approach. You know what I mean? We want our work to matter. We want to, use our skills in the best possible way. And so, Lucha Libre, because it has such a cultural, fan base, love affair, and there's a lot of historical roots to it. And so we wanted to kind of like, and I'm a big, not fan, I guess fan, but it's like, I like to study, Mexican history. I like to study ancient history. I like to study like those Aztecs and the Olmecs and Toltecs and stuff like that. And so it's like, I like to see where these threads of culture come through, you know what I mean? And where they kind of manifest in kind of the modern sense. And so in that, ancient Mexico, there's a lot of masks, you know what I mean? And it's like, it was very clear to me that it was informing, you know what I mean, the Lucha Libre, ethos, I guess, for lack of a better word, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's an affinity that the culture has, you know what I mean? And people were very much like, and plus also you like Mexico is a unique civilization. And so like you have somebody like El Santo, you know what I mean? It's just like, as a figure, you know what I mean, in their pantheon of wrestlers. And so it's just like all these little elements and how the costumes are put together and the Greco-Roman wrestling of it all. And so it's just like all those things are super interesting. So, you find, to make it your own, you find what you're passionate about. Like how can you connect, you know what I mean, to the thing? And that's what it really was for me because, like I said, I didn't, grow up with wrestling per se. You know what I mean? But in this particular world, it's like, oh, I get it. So this cultural phenomenon in Mexico from like the 30s and on, you know what I mean? It's just like, was their popular culture and their movies. And so that's what really kind of turned me onto it. And then it's just like, because since we, enjoy superheroes, not just in America and just my own life, you know what I mean? So it's like, how can you create that fusion, you know what I mean, together and to tell a compelling story? You know what I mean? In this sense, it was for Disney. And, they had this young actress, Scarlett Estevez, who's amazing. And so like putting those things together, it's just like, oh, what does it mean for her when she gets her magical mask? You know what I mean? And then when we created the uncle character, it's like, who is he and why was it important to him? Or why was it, what's his connection, you know what I mean, to the wrestling world?
I mean, something that we really like to do in our projects is infusing it sort of with world culture and or history. A lot of times we love working in a genre, but the genre really becomes like a framework to tell the emotional character stories that are happening in it. We like stories that have a lot of heart, that deliver some sort of emotional punch, and also comedy and humor. We approach things with a lot of comedy and humor. And I think based on what Eric was saying, it was very interesting because he got very into the mask research of it all. And one of the things that we discovered is that, in the ancient cultural masks, like with the Aztecs and stuff, a lot of them, there's a lot of iconography and symbolism that is supposed to imbue the wearer with powers, right? And so we're like, oh, that's really interesting because a lot of the same iconography and symbolism is in Lucha Libre costumes and Lucha Libre masks that are made and put together. So what if those things imbue the wearer with powers as well? And so suddenly you start sort of bridging the world between, or blending the world sort of between like Lucha Libre and superhero together. As you put on these different types of masks, there's a mythology behind it. In our show, there's 12 masks. Some of them are technicos, some of them are rudos. So they're superpowered heroes, superpowered villains, essentially. And it's like a Lucha Libre mask that is happening on a cosmic proportion, playing across the globe. And it happens to intersect in Los Angeles.
So cool. When I went down to Mexico a bunch of years ago, you walk around everywhere you go, they're selling masks. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
the wrestling mask. So I don't know if you guys are familiar, but La Parca was a famous,
Yep.
was a famous Lucha Libre star. So I got his mask. My wife's like, "Oh, what are you nuts? What are you crazy?" But I was like, this is awesome. Like, you go to a foreign country and
Yeah.
you get, uprooted all this wrestling stuff. To me, it was awesome. It was so cool. I was like, man, a Mill mask or his mask? It's just so cool that their masks are everywhere there. I mean, you want to
Yes.
go to the bar, there's a mask. I mean, just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Well, it's a part of their culture, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Much more so, you know what I mean, from ancient times. You know what I mean? It's just like you know, it just is.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I think cultures that have, history rooted in masks really embrace lucha libre wrestling. Like Japan, for instance, it's very, very popular in Japan, and Japan also has a really strong mask culture. Like with kabuki theater and all that sort of stuff, and just with the ancient peoples there. And so I think they see that power and they see the coolness and like becoming a different person and the identity of it and sort of what that represents and the magic of it. Yeah.
The transformation that happens when you put a mask on.
Yeah.
Now I know Lavi, you're chomping at the bit. You got a bunch of questions. So Lavi.
100%. So before getting into the wrestling side of thing, first I just wanted to express that this was a family show. My daughter is 12, my son is 8, and they all like the show. At first, my daughter would use it as a distraction before going to sleep. She would watch whatever, and then right before she went to sleep, she's like, "Daddy, do you want to watch this show?" And she knew she could get me in that way. But then they found their rhythm, and then they just what do you call that? Like binge watched it. And my son was upset, that it ended on a cliffhanger. So
yes.
Thank you for that.
As are we.
So what before getting to the wrestling aspect as well, something that really struck me was two portions. I think from the mom. I mean, everyone was very genuine in the show, but from the mom, there was two scenes, and I was curious if it came from either of your lives. One was talking about that they wanted to have a sleepover, and they said, we don't do that. We don't have sleepovers that aren't at our grandparents. And the second was the disappointment in the son wanting a career that was non-traditional. So was that sort of from your research? It felt more real like that, like something that you might have experienced yourselves.
Oh, that's a great question. I would say it was definitely real. We have a writer's room, so there's writers that we work with, and half the writers are Hispanic, half of them are women. And, we talk a lot of just about like real life things because we want the show to be very relatable and to also really speak to the lives of like kids, who are growing up. And something that came up that I was surprised by is that, in a lot of Mexican families, the kids are not allowed to go to sleepovers, especially the girls. Like for boys, it's a little more lax. Like, oh yeah, you're a boy, you can go to sleepover. But for a girl, you can't. And like for female writers in our room, they were like, yeah, I was never allowed to go to a sleepover's house unless it was at my aunt's or at a cousin's. But like friends, like I was like the kid who was missing from the sleepovers. And we're like, oh, this is really interesting because that seems like something that you can really mine, especially for a coming of age story.
It was really pervasive, actually. All the women actually when the sleepover thing came up had a lot of that experience, and they weren't all necessarily Mexican per se. They're all Latin, and it was like, whoa, what is going on here? Why is this such a thing? And there are different attitudes, like some just, it was like either safety or just something that was just not a part of their culture. It's something that the mothers never did, you know what I mean? And so the daughters aren't going to do it, you know what I mean? And some of them were just like, they didn't want to impose on other families. It's just like, why? It's just like, and they take their, child rearing very responsibly. It's like, why should I put that burden on someone else? It's like, we have our own food. I can feed my child. You know what I mean? There's so many things that were tied up into it. And so we were like, oh, we have to do an episode about that. I thought that was because it touched a nerve.
Yes. And for the son, Tiago, for that was sort of drawn from our own lives. And also lives from a lot of the other writers too. When you choose to walk an artistic path or become like a writer or an artist, or in his case, he wanted to become a designer, a fashion designer. And you have parents who, his mother is an immigrant, on the show, the dad is a nurse, the mom's a principal. She worked her way up to become a principal. They have a lot of dreams for you. And like an artistic life is not one of them. And it's sort of, in my own family, I think it was really hard. It was very hard for my parents to kind of wrap their heads around. I thought my dad would actually object the most to it. But it turned out the person who objected the most was my mother, who I'm actually closer to, and my father was the one who sort of came around the quickest. And he was like, you know what? I came to this country and I wanted to pursue my dreams. My son should pursue his dreams. And my mom is really concerned about the safety and the stability of it. And she was very resistant to it, and that sort of plays out a bit in the show too. I think those sort of parallels, because the father is someone who sort of comes around to it sooner than the mother. And she ultimately has a lot of journey. We're able to play it over several episodes, sort of his arc and his own discovery, because it's something that he, is not celebrated for, because he's this kid who's good at all this stuff, right? He's good at sports, he's good at school, he's good on the debate team. But here's the one thing that he hasn't been celebrated for that he's really passionate about.
I think also, as showrunners and show creators, there's a lot of responsibility for what you put out there in the world. And so from a socio and economic level, we want it to be aspirational, not just, about like to show that, that higher education is open and it is important. You know what I mean? And there are definitely, in the Latin communities, it's like sometimes there is a resistance to kind of that higher education. And then also but fundamentally, it was really about dreams. You know what I mean? And so it's like, this is a Disney show. We want people to, aspire and achieve their dreams and kind of be, just even allowing yourself to think it, even for a moment, is a liberating thing. And I think it's important, regardless of what we end up doing with our lives, of like what choices we make, out of practicality or whatever, but it's just important to have that open if people aspire to that.
Yeah, and to have parents who wanted their kids to go to college
and not feel bad about having a dream. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's just like, so that's an important consideration that we thought about as we put something out in the world.
I love it. And what's interesting that I found is that the first person to celebrate it is often the person that's like most resistant. So I'm sure when the press release came out about Disney and whatever your first projects were, that those people are very happy for you. So to sound cool, I'm going to name drop. We had on here a few weeks ago Dorian Roldan, who runs Lucha Libre AAA.
Cool.
So in asking him about the series, certainly he was familiar with it and a little bit of its life cycle, but he said that even though they have a Marvel series where the characters dress up like Marvel characters, and there was something dropped in Latin America, a short series, that the two worlds never met because they were separate divisions. Was there a point where it was considered like outreach to AAA, EMLL, or maybe even Rey Mysterio Jr. through WWE to like get more involvement, or post Blue Demon Jr. was sort of like, let's just do this in-house on our own?
That's a really good question. And I feel like that might be a bit above our pay grade, because it happens at the corporate level. You know what I mean? Like from our point of view, like we would love to get more involvement, with Lucha Libre AAA and Rey Mysterio Jr. That'd be amazing, or to have him on the show or whatever. It's interesting because I think with first season shows, typically it's hard to get huge guest stars on your show, right? They want to know what it is first before you can start booking them. And, there's this interesting thing because, lucha or luchar means to struggle, right? And this show, in the making of the show, was like a huge struggle. Like we did it during COVID, during the pandemic. There's all these shutdowns. There's a hurricane that hit. We shot it in New Orleans, which doubled for LA due to the tax credits. And so those sort of things, were ideas that we definitely talked about with the marketing and promotional team at Disney. But I don't know that they were pursued very far.
It's also something that Disney is not necessarily, I think, as familiar with. It's not their, it's not really their domain in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's not like Disney's really good at partnering within itself. Like Disney is the big, 800-pound gorilla, right? And I don't know that they necessarily seek partnerships outside of things that they own.
I think it's also, this is also a thing about, pushing into more, Latin themed content.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like Disney that's not their core, concern, at traditionally,
Right.
You know what I mean? But they do understand, that, the way the demographics are, there's just like more and more, Latino kids, in the United States. And so we want to create content for them,
Right.
that they can relate to.
And I think that maybe speaks to a larger issue within Hollywood in general. And if this is wildly off topic, I'm happy to dial it back. But, you know, I think, you know, there's been several sort of Latino shows that have come out. Most of them end up being 1-season shows or very, you know, short, it's like 2 short seasons or something like that. And I think there was an appetite in Hollywood without actually understanding how to reach out to the audience necessarily, or supporting the shows completely with marketing or a big marketing push. You know, in addition to Ultraviolet, Black Scorpion, I mean, Gordita Chronicles, Hentified, you know, what was the spinoff of On My Block called? Like Fremont or Free something, you know, that Jar was on. You know, and they're all like 1-season shows. And I think that just keeps on happening, you know, within the Hollywood system. And these shows don't find an audience unless you push it and market it. And I think there's this appetite to make it, but then maybe not an appetite to spend on the marketing.
So, in speaking to Dorian Roldan, a lot of the discussion has been, and this is actually from his uncle starting the company 30 years ago. There's always been success in Mexico, but coming to the U.S., it's like touch and go. There's been certain points where it's hit well, and other points where it hasn't hit very well at all. So they're always looking for that. So, as people who have sort of found the right rhythm, I feel like in terms of lucha libre, but not being in the wrestling business, if Dorian were to call you today and said, can you consult with me, give me some advice, how do we break into the American market in a way that would be meaningful, what would you do or what would you say?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I actually think, you know, I mean, it's interesting. I was kind of prepared for that question a little bit. You know, I kind of, there is a bubbling awareness, you know what I mean, of lucha libre, and especially from the graphics of it. You know what I mean? It's on products. You mean, I see it on beers, I see it on tequila, I see it on, you know what I mean, there are costumes that people, you know what I mean, enjoy putting on. But it's still at this kind of early stage. If you think of, like, say, something like anime 30 years ago, it was like you have a really intense fan base, and there's like an underground element. There's like, there's performances. There's also right now a really tremendous exhibit about lucha in San Diego, the modern, museum in modern art in San Diego, and which I have to go see. And it's like, you know what I mean? It's still in its kind of like early phases. And so until they become, and, anime is one of those things that has like incrementally been, grown like in American culture. And so for lucha to do that, it is, one, you have to keep at it. And two, it is like, you're looking for what is that explosive thing? What is that explosive thing that really connects? And I guess that's the equation. It's just like, what can we do, to make that specifically? I think, obviously the wrestling not angle, but it's like, in WWE, it's just like that has a built-in audience. And so it's like, as that grows, and then it's supported in other areas in culture. There's also animated shows, that have like more lucha libre kind of concepts. I've seen numerous development. I haven't seen the shows.
Yeah, I think Rey Mysterio Jr. has done a lot for lucha libre and just the awareness of it. But to Eric's point, I feel like in order to grow something like this, you almost have to do kind of what we did with sort of a family show. Like, you need a family audience, you need kids to be buying into it young and to kind of help grow it and become fans of it. Like, a lot of the audience that has seen Ultraviolet Black Scorpion, interestingly, aren't even that familiar with lucha libre. Like, this is the first they're learning about it. Like, just as a personal anecdote, like my nieces and nephew love the show, but they didn't know anything about it, right? And then as a result of it, they and their friends are learning more about lucha libre.
That's why we had in the pilot that we were teaching technicos and rudos. You know what I mean? It's just like we're trying to inculcate, like our audience to what it is. You know what I mean? And obviously the superhero angle, is a something that they could connect with. Yes.
So it gives you like a good entry point. It's weird. It's almost like anime is a very good example of it because it was considered very, very niche.
30 years ago. Yeah.
30 years ago. It was something that people were like trying to get bootlegs of. Like, it was very hard to see. And now it's like the fastest growing on any fastest
streaming
growing
platform. Yeah.
Yeah, linear on any streaming platform. So that's like a huge thing. I feel like it's a little bit like, this is gonna sound crazy, like ninjas in the 80s, right? Like ninja, like people were kind of aware of martial arts. Martial arts was cool in the 70s, maybe early 80s. And then there's like those movies that came, the Three Ninjas movies. I don't know if you remember those, and kids love them. And as a result, the ninja stuff really took off. And there's like these adult ninja movies and all this, because the kids got older. Like they wanted to watch more sophisticated ninja stuff. And so it kind of grows, and suddenly it's like people dress up as ninjas. It's just everywhere. And
I think in some ways also it's like you have to follow the audience. So now, the audience is like whatever young, your kids are 12 and 8 and stuff like that. So if we can get another show, if there can be another show, either, at that same age or, when they're like 15, 16. Do you know what I mean? Like you grow with the as the audience grows. That's basically what happened with anime. It's just like, we're all kids, you know what I mean? It's 17, 18. It's like doing those first, videos and, like the bootleg videos. And then, 30 years later, it's like you have 30 years of track record, you know what I mean? That people, can follow.
Awesome. So it sounds like Lucha needs its own Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series.
Yeah. Well, that's another great example. Yes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but with the ninja proliferation. Yeah, you need some like a next thing. Like it has to keep building, right? This can't be the only
iteration.
Lucha show.
You need another iteration. You know what I mean?
We're all for it. Let me turn over to John.
So, Leo, Eric, where can everybody find the show, find you guys, social media, everything? Give us the deets.
Well, the show is currently streaming on Disney Plus. You have to do a little search for it, Ultraviolet and Black Scorpion. It's a show. It's a great show for like the entire family. So people of all ages can watch it. There's a lot of humor. There's heart. There's sort of a point to each episode. We're, as writers, we always write very thematically, so everything's about something. It's not just frivolous. It's been, we have a cultural consultant on the show as well, and she has been so wildly supportive and amazing. She's the same cultural consultant who consulted on Coco and other projects and stuff for Disney. And she's just like, it is. It not only just trumpets the values of just Mexican culture, but also just trumpets like the values of just like having like good family, things, as well, which she was very, very proud of to work on, which I thought was a very sweet note that she sent us. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter. My handles, is that what you want? My handles?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. On Twitter, it's at Leo Chu, LEOCHU 88. And on Instagram, it's at Leo_Chu88. And I put the underscore in there because somebody else took my Twitter handle for the Instagram.
And I'm at Planet Eric on Twitter as well as Instagram. And and LinkedIn.
Yeah. And you can find other shows that we worked on as well. I mean, they're on our Twitter handles and stuff. But, we started off working in anime. So Afro Samurai is a show, which is probably more martial arts than wrestling. I don't think there's any wrestling in it, in fact, that I think about. And we did Batman Ninja, was just definitely more superhero. And then we actually worked on our coming of age thing, which sort of got us to be known for coming of age stories, especially with girls, called Alexa and Katie. It was on Netflix. It's a comedy about a girl who gets cancer and her best friend and family who helps her through it. So it's handled with a lot of humor and care.
Great stuff, Leo and Eric. Thank you so much for joining us here on the business of the business. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks so much,
gentlemen. Really appreciate it. Thank you, John.
Take care. All the best.
Thank you, guys.
It was a pleasure. Well. Bye.
All right, Lavi, getting into a little bit of the news, right? I mean, what is going on? As we'll wait for our next guest, but what's going on out there? Anything pressing? Anything important out there, news-wise?
So one of the notable things, especially like in terms of the promotions that we really watch week to week, is I think GCW is going to have a big summer. It's already starting, as we talked about my escapades in Brooklyn. But I'm looking week to week, and Ohio looked kind of weak, WEAK, and then it picked up, smaller venue, but Vegas, in your town, Atlantic City. Really curious news as their sort of staple venue, or their portion of the venue, the Carousel Room in the Showboat is going to become an actual carousel room or something like that. So now they're in an annex that, what I could find online, it looks like I don't want to misrepresent it. It almost looks like a parking garage. It's like a big space that would be fine for like a comic convention or something like that. But it looked like there was a lot of pillars there. So I'm not sure what the sight lines would be as they go
Right.
6 rows deep, and then people standing there as well. So hopefully that doesn't slow their momentum. But from Vegas to LA, things are really picking up there as we watch sort of like the ebbs and flows of a promotion like that.
Interesting, though. Is that a different venue for them, or just is the venue changing, or is the physical venue actually going under construction?
Yeah, so it seems like they were told, maybe, I'm not sure of the timeline, but that the carousel room was no longer available. Remember last summer, um, my thought was that since Nick Gage was having this like defense or retire thing, that they decided to go outside just to accommodate people, but they just needed the space for whatever reason. It was double booked. But here, every week I see in my Google News feeds, like the Showboat is doing like indoor motor racing and water parks and whatever. So they're really on the upswing. So the live events, especially like the combat sports and wrestling, they're shifting that around. So GCW will still be in that venue. So it'll be interesting to see, like, if now that they have more time, they're going to shift the end of the summer events too. Probably not. But after that, if there's like a space that works for them better in Atlantic City, or just this venue, is the best fit.
I know it's not just Atlantic City, but it feels like they're always doing some sort of construction down there, or something is always going on in Atlantic City for whatever reason. And I just always feel like something's always going on down there.
Yeah, I saw that a hotel actually paid to bring in some sand. Their federal government would pay for it, but they didn't want to wait like the several months. They're like, hey, it's the high season. We're selling hotel rooms, so we don't want to be too far from. We're promising people like ocean views, but they need a beach to go to, so they're actually importing that in.
So interesting, like when you just look at just Atlantic City, like it just has so much stuff going on, but then that Bamboozle thing got canceled. So whenever something disappears, I don't know, something else kind of comes into play. To me, anyway,
Yeah,
it always seems like that. It's like always coming and going in Atlantic City.
to me, Boardwalk Hall like sort of like always has that magical feel. I don't know if you were there, John. Remember when Frank Mir fought Tank Abbott? It was like UFC 41.
I was not there, but I know that fight very well. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
41 or 42. And then I used to go to the boxing matches, especially when I was single. Once I took it like Saturday night, went to the boxing, and then took the bus back to the Port Authority at like 3 a.m., which was a little crazy at the time, but I was younger and having a good time.
Wow, big fan. Even all the way back then. Damn, that's got to be what? Oh, 01-ish? I mean, that's a while ago.
Yeah, so there was that with the UFC fight. It was that was like that first like Zuffa fight where it was like seemed like they had something to go on, like Shamrock Ortiz, and then they had like in 41 they had something in Miami that didn't draw very well, and then the next one was Atlantic City. Tank Abbott fans filled up Boardwalk Hall, which was interesting. But that's also when Tim Sylvia won the world title quick from Rico Rodriguez.
All right, here we go. We got a special guest joining us here, Lavi.
Hey,
The man that never stops.
Yes, a very special guest, special podcast today. Welcome, Court Bauer of Major League Wrestling, the man that needs no introduction. MLW, never stops.
It sure doesn't. We take little breaks in between seasons, but we try not to stop. You don't want to stop moving, right?
Very true. It's crazy because, like the quote, MLW, the world, MLW never stops. I mean,
That
the world
podcast, that wasn't on our podcast, and we haven't used that slogan in years, but for some reason it has stuck. I don't know why. Sometimes it's like, it's almost antagonistic to me. I wake up to it and I'm like, no, please stop.
Stuck in my head. The world of MLW never stops. Yeah, it's like stuck in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the old podcast jingle.
Yeah. So what is going on with MLW and now Fight Plus? Like, how come now? Why did it feel right to do it now, the deal?
Well, we had done live monthly stuff since, gosh, 2018 with BN Sports, and it was a nice window for us from a creative point of view because you accumulate your TV and do your TV taping, but you wanted that live window. I think wrestling live is, and any sport live is the only real thing you really get excited about, you get pumped for. And you can do your tile switches, shoot angles, have big surprises, and people can tune in and see it in real time instead of wait 6 weeks, 4 weeks. And then we were doing that all the way up until basically the pandemic. Pandemic hits, everything gets weird for an indefinite amount of time. You come out of the pandemic, and so since then we've been trying to kind of find the right destination for that. And Fight, no one does it better than Fight. Their track record speaks for itself. They have a really exciting emerging Fight Plus submodel, and it's like looking at how wrestling right now is on fire, and it's great, right? But you have all these options, and it's like the idea for me to say, okay, we're gonna go to pay-per-view and then go out there and try to uh, put a price tag of what, 34, 64, $44 a price point on a pay-per-view. It's like, well, how many times can our audience sustain that? What's the economy like, and all those things, all those variables, and you're just looking at the future, and it's always streaming and subscription. I'm like, this is just a good marriage to be a part of a service like this at this time. Give the fans value. I mean, we've always believed in that. I mean, our tickets start at $10, and we've never tried to price gouge our audience. I was like, you know what? For $7.99 to get us monthly, plus you can binge on MLW, the archives and stuff. It just felt like a good fit, and allows us also from a creative point of view to finally unify our TV tapings and our live stuff and our big angles, big tile switch, and all these cool things with a live window. So, we're going to burn off some footage, and now things won't be so delayed. It just kind of checked off every box.
I talked to Mike Weber not too long ago, and I know me and Lavi talked to Mike Weber not too long ago, and I said to him, "It's like MLW would be perfect." He didn't, he didn't say no, he didn't say yes, but something. So I was like, "Oh, I wonder if that was on his mind a while ago too." Like, hey, we got to get MLW. So were you talking to Mike for a while, or was this something that just kind of popped up?
Well, Mike and I go back to like 2013, 2012, when we were both at Ring of Honor, both as consultants, in different ways, but consultants. And we actually, had a lot of mutual friends, we found out. So we've known each other for like 10 years. And then when I was doing stuff with like Combati Americas and then AAA and all these different companies, we just kept bumping each other. It's a small world. And so we did a lot of business over the years. And then we've been kind of talking about doing something with Fight and different permutations, different things over the years, different ideas, different models on both sides. And it never really quite fit. And then this year we finally got something that really worked and pinned it down. So we were really excited to do it.
Now, with the international distribution, really, of 13 episodes of Underground on Premiere, was
Mhm.
there any thought of using them instead of going to Fight Plus, maybe being both? Like, what did you think about Premiere streaming?
That's a great service. I mean, I think the fans, I think organizations, you want to have as many viable options as possible out there to have conversations with, to explore. And for a fan's point of view, more options the better. And so we were really excited to have our international rights for the Underground season one go to PSN. It was a good experience. We had a great time with them. Wishing them good luck on everything. And so yeah, no, only positive experience with those guys.
What did you think about Freddie Prince Jr. getting involved in the wrestling business?
Hey man, he's passionate about it. He worked at WWE. He's worked in big studio. He's worked in TV. It's certainly a qualified guy in terms of understanding a very unique business at the highest levels he's worked. And so, how hands on is he? I don't know. But I certainly think it's given this startup business a nice spark out of the gates.
So, what about Be In Sports and Fusion? Like, what's the latest on what's going to happen there?
No, we premiere next weekend on BN Extra, and then BN Sports and BN Espanol. We've had a relationship with them for, gosh, since 2018, since the last spring. We just hit an anniversary, spring of 2018. And so we've done several seasons with them. They've been a great partner. We're excited always to be their exclusive wrestling on their network. And what I love is their fast channel, BN Extra. I mean, we do the biggest audience of all of their offerings on BN Extra because it's also over the air in key markets like LA, San Francisco, Philadelphia, so on and so forth. Plus, it's a fast channel. I mean, there's not another fast channel that offers live sports or blended live and tape sports. And they got into fast channels, I think, in like 2018, 2019, before even they were called that, really. And so they were first in the market and got massive distribution, get them any which way. You can watch MLW virtually any way through that. So they've been a great partner. I think BN Sports as a whole has allowed us a few things. One, a steady, it's allowed us stability, and allowed us to navigate a lot of choppy waters, whether it was pandemic, emerging competitors, and we stumbled into things we didn't know were going to be opportunities. Cultivating, developing a Spanish language fan base that then allowed us to explore bringing in more luchadors. So all these interesting things they have, they're kind of like happy accidents when you go into it. And so it's been a very positive relationship. So we're glad to kick off Fusion next week with them. And of course, it's also on YouTube. It's also on Fight Plus. We just want to really maximize the opportunities for fans to watch it through whether your fast channels, your Fight Plus model, YouTube, you name it. We're going to put it out there.
Being is non-exclusive, like it's okay to be here and there, like they don't mind that kind of thing.
Well, they're linear, so it's like a lot of media rights deals, whether it's like WWE. There's linear exclusivity for USA Network with Raw or NXT, and then Hulu has second window rights, those kind of things.
Okay, what about like a home base? Would you consider the 2300 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania? Would you consider that like the home base now for MLW?
We had our first show there in 2002, so I guess it is a bit of a home base, and it's been a great home for us. The fans of all the markets we run are so locked in. They bring signs. They really get the storylines. They have been so supportive. So yeah, I think it's been a long time that Philly's had a monthly wrestling offering that's there, and it's kind of become our home base. So yeah, no, we're really grateful for the relationship. There's a lot of history, a lot of ghosts in that building, and it's a great place to check out wrestling. Whether you live in the Northeast, it's easy for fans from DC to get up there, or Baltimore, or from New York City, or Jersey, or Connecticut. So it's just a great hub for people that want to go within 2 hours. Boom, you're in Philly. You're getting a cheesesteak and watching wrestling.
I've been to a bunch of MLW shows there. I'm only in Asbury Park, so I mean it's an easy hour ride, maybe even less sometimes to get there. I just love the the amenities to the building now, because I know people think, oh, the ECW arena was it was the bingo hall, whatever. It's so nice there. The bar is awesome. They got couches, the stools, the chairs. I mean, it's crazy like to think like, wait, that was the same arena? No, different spot. No, that was the arena.
It's so it's so incredible how they put so much money into it, and they have like craft beers and stuff, and have a really nice concession area. When I ran my first show in there was a converted, I'm going to call it a shower. It was a phone booth, which don't exist anymore. And there was a shower head in there. You close the phone booth and people would take a shower. And the only guy, I guess, that was brave enough, or maybe had a tetanus shot or whatever, was Raven, who would use it as a shower. And Charlie Brzezis, who was the head of ECW production and was involved with MLW production, would say, yeah, he's been doing that since like 94. I was like, oh, it's so gross. And it's been there since 94. The thing is nasty. Don't put a black light near it.
Man, it has to be like '03 or something like that. '02, '03. Buddies with Just Incredible, and he took me a tour like behind the scenes. And this is after CZW even ruined it even further. That and it was like such a mess. To see it then, to see it now, it's almost like they did a miraculous job. It's amazing how nice it is.
Yeah, I kind of wish they had done that for Yankee Stadium instead of building the new one. But hey,
Yep. So as far as MLW, we're talking about 2300. We're talking about like a home base, but what are some markets that you plan on opening up, or you've never been to, you want to go to for the first time?
Yeah, I think we really are targeting the South. We want to hit the South a bit hard in the next year or so. We've looked at like going out to LA, and we've flirted with things like that over the years. We were very close to doing some of those things. There's a lot of costs involved with that, unless you have kind of a satellite setup over there. You're talking about a lot of things you have to get from East Coast to the West Coast. And when you figure in inflation and stuff, you look at the margins, and it's like, it'd be nice to go out there, but for business and your fiduciary responsibility company, it feels a little hard and a bit of a swing unless you really, adjust ticket prices and do all those things. So right now we're really focused on the South and building out kind of the East Coast.
Lavi, I'll turn it over to you for some questions for Court.
Great. Thanks, Cord. Thanks, John. I think interestingly and advantageously, MLW at times has sort of been an island unto itself, whereas some of the other national promotions, you would see like talent crossover, all the time. Let's say like one of my favorites now, Masha Slamovich, she could be on GCW and Impact at the same time. You'll see NWA talent migrate here, even to AEW, whereas the core MLW talent is sort of is there week to week, but you don't see them travel sort of like in terms of widely exposed national promotions. Do you think that works best? And might there be a little bit more of the overused term multiverse coming soon?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked over the years with different companies in different ways. Last summer we did a little crossover with New Japan. We did one with we did the whole Conrad show and things. So we did like an Impact kind of crossover with Fat 2 and Alexander over there. And then the NWA too. And then in years past, we've done stuff with, IWA Puerto Rico and AAA and stuff. So, it's like when it works great. If it doesn't work, you just don't want to, kind of be a dick when you tell the other side's like, yeah, it doesn't work for us. You have to be kind of tactful to make sure, look, this could work for us, but that can't work for us. And sometimes, you're at an impasse and sometimes you're not, but we've always been open to have those conversations. And if it makes sense, we do it. And that's kind of how it's gone. So, what's ahead, who knows? We always have, we're willing to have a conversation and the phone's always on.
John and I have talked about it many times that I think one of the best modern interpromotional feuds was the Ring of Honor CZW, where you had different sets of bleachers and so on. And I think coming to Fight Plus, as we're so lucky to have a great relationship with Fight, it often comes up with Mike and whoever we're talking about, GCW. And I think the philosophies of MLW and GCW on the outside looking in seem very different. So those differences sometimes bring interesting things. Do you think that there could be some conversations with a promotion like GCW and Brett Lauderdale?
Yeah, I think you look at wrestling as a whole, and there was a time when, I was 4 or 5 years in the business, and WCW and ECW had just gone down. And you had this like scorched earth effect over the entire business, where there was nowhere to work. There was, for fans, not much to watch unless you really liked one product. And so you had to go, maybe you went and checked out CMLL or AAA or New Japan and hoped for the best. But now you have all these options. And I think it's such a great time to be a wrestling fan, whether it's the AEWs and MLWs and Impacts, all the way down to the GCWs and CZWs and Beyonds and all these companies. I think there's always opportunities, always things you can do. And the thing I think it's great is the fans get all these options. They can see all these unique matches. They can see these things that they haven't seen, maybe, or they thought they weren't going to see. So you never know what's around the corner. You don't know, the other side of the room, what they're talking about, what their strategies are, what their goals are. But I think wrestling right now is in a great place. So you never, as they say, I guess with our Fight Plus paper, you never say never. You never know what's around the corner. But I think wrestling right now, having the opportunity to have all these companies, sometimes, like I thought the Ric Flair retirement show was such a great thing, because you saw like virtually almost every company in some way working together, doing interpromotional match or being showcased. And so even if you're a fan of something specific on the show, there's probably something you did like. And I think that was a great reflection of where wrestling's at right now. And that's a good thing, because in 2002, you didn't have that.
So it used to be that Impact, like when you look at sort of their strengths, one of them was international distribution, and certainly working with Fight, in terms of a digital distribution, that's still there, but you don't see as much, from my understanding, in terms of like traditional cable or over the air, whereas MLW is very strong. And forgive the pronunciation if I'm messing it up. Wata Fight Channel, Star Times.
Wata! It's after Bruce Lee. Wata!
Oh,
That's what's up.
I'll just listen as opposed to trying to do it. Fight Club, Poland. I'm a little disappointed I don't think you're on in Israel anymore. I think that station might not be around anymore. But what's the importance of like international distribution, like as a 10-pole or as a base to MLW?
It's a great thing because like our deal Star Times, like fans are finding out about us. We get like feedback emails from fans in Nigeria. They're like, this is amazing. I have never seen wrestling, or I haven't seen anything but one type of wrestling, and I just didn't know about MLW. So you're exposing them to your product. And from terms of a business, you want to have as broad of a base in terms of revenues you can get. So you want to be in as many countries as you can. For us now to be in approximately something like 60 countries, including like the UK and stuff, it's so helpful. And I kind of stumbled upon it when I originally did MLW, and people just cold emailed me in like '02 or '03, like, hey, you willing to do a distribution deal in India? I was like, sure. I don't know what to do here. I'm 21, don't know how to negotiate these deals. And then like through All Japan, we were able to get into a deal with Garo TV in Japan. So like you see the value, the impact, and then you find strategic relationships with promotions maybe over on those sides of the world. But it's just that there's no downside. It's great, and you're getting revenue from it, and you're growing awareness for your company.
So YouTube, is the biggest, streaming distribution, maybe, or the most accessible, I guess you could define it. And wrestling companies for a while have been trying to figure out like what's the best way to approach this. I know MLW has, and even talking to like Matt Ryan at Catalyst Wrestling, sort of sometimes there's full episodes, sometimes there's clips, sometimes there's teasers, sometimes there's full shows. So like, what's the best way to approach YouTube like in 2023?
I mean, YouTube's still experimenting, right? So you got, they have their shorts and all these things that they're trying to implement. The biggest struggle with YouTube is unless you have a very unique arrangement with them, which is very hard to do. I think only one company in the genre of wrestling has that relationship. Monetizing the revenue, the content, getting what you should for the ad rates and revenue, it's sorely disappointing. You're basically just trying to give the fans the footage as best you can for free, realizing it's almost a marketing tool, and you're not going to get the rich revenue that you can get elsewhere for it. Thankfully we have other options and how we tap into that, but it's great in building the base, but it's not on its own a sustainable platform. And as those other sustainable platforms start to enter the picture, YouTube's going to be a different thing. It's going to be probably less prioritized for most companies. And I think everyone has a shifting strategy. I think it's like try clips, so you try different things and see what works. And ultimately you're trying to break through the clutter. There's the beauty is, like I said earlier, there's so many companies that are all doing cool shit, different shit. But you also got to find a way to break through the clutter, and you try different ways to do that. You realize, it's a big ass fans try to get in there and watch our show every week, but maybe they have 2 minutes to watch the coolest thing from your show. So you get that out there on all your social media channels, and you get it out there on YouTube.
So of course we're talking MLW every week. We're watching MLW. We're reading, even legal filings without getting too deep into that. That has certain language about maybe prospects for MLW into the future. But from you, Court, how would you define the future of MLW as it stands today? With all the positives and all the challenges, is the future super bright, sunny, or cloudy?
I mean, in terms of a weather forecast, we've got nice visibility coming on the horizon here, low humidity, no turbulence on the horizon. I think the key thing and what I'm happy about right now is I can see into 24, and it is a frictionless forecast. It is I can see it clearly. There's not these bumps in the road or disruptions. It's like I know exactly where we are on all the key deals and distribution. There's not going to be any weird disruptions. It's just nice, smooth sailing. And I think stability is very important. That was one of the biggest priorities for me this year. Is just like, we got to make it airtight and nice and clear going forward. And, I think the bundle of our distribution, and with Fight now having a live window with our premium live events, we give that. And so that's the, that then allows us to then go further monetize the company, then further have time to focus on the creative, and it just enriches the company when you don't have that volatility. Anything that's destabilizing for someone that's going to have to deal with it at the helm, it's like then it takes me away from other things. So now I think we're in a position where the waters are calm and the visibility is great.
So last question for me. I was so sorry to see them, come apart a little bit. Are you on Team Microman or Team MSL?
Microman, come on. How's MSL likable? Come on.
John?
With Microman, are you surprised at the popularity, or you kind of knew like, okay, he's going to get over, really, really well?
The first time I saw him in Arena Mexico, I was like, "Ooh, wait, hold up," because I was a fan of his father. I was curious. I didn't really know the story too much about the father, and then when I saw Microman, I was like, "Ooh, that's," you have to go through all these TV meetings, whether I'm meeting with streaming partners, cable partners, and they're like, we're all looking for our Mandalorian. Was the big like mission statement for virtually every network, every streaming service for like the last 3 years when Mandalorian took off. And when I saw Microman, I was like, that might be our baby Yoda. I mean, from a marketing point of view, bringing a new audience in terms of merchandise. I mean, he's killing it on Hot Topics. And I think when his action figure drops, it's going to be great. I mean, he's just, and he is kind of like Baby Yoda. He's very shy. And so he's been unique. I mean, I think whenever you can offer fans something different, they're not going to see everywhere else. For certain fans, I think it's like just jarring. Like, I don't know. But damn, you know what? That's pretty cool. And in terms of, I think there's a lot out of curiosity when you first see him. And then when you see him do his thing, it's like, okay, you won me over. It's different. And I think the variety in wrestling is always good to have that kind of thing. And he's not someone you're going to see on every show. He's just good to see him in MLW and he's going to do something crazy. I mean, whether it's in a lucha match doing trio stuff or one-on-one, or he's even been in a dumpster match. We've found unique ways to take Microman and do different things with. So I'm excited to see what we can do with him in the future. Again, this is like a guy that's it's kind of like he's an inverted Andre the Giant. He's just like very small, but he's so unique. We had Guinness Book of World Records reach out and they're like, we'd like to actually interview him, and because the Guinness Book of World Records has like a very thorough process to see if you actually hit the benchmarks for a record. So we're actually going through a little bit of that now. I'm like, wow, they're actually interviewing him and they're like grilling him and they're like doing measurements. I was like, man, I guess we'll see what happens with that. But he's up for a world record.
He won me over too, because at first I'm like, "What's going on here, Microman?" And then I watched. I was like, "Wow, he won me over. He is like Grogu. Yeah, he wins you over. Yeah."
You call him Grogu. You're a Grogu.
Yeah.
I'm a Baby Yoda. I tried Grogu for like a few days. Like
my son calls him Baby Yoda. Even if I say Grogu, he still says Baby Yoda. So that's just the way it is.
And now he has a last name. Not to nerd out. Now he has a last name, so I'm trying to keep up with that, which is confusing. Or maybe it's a first name. I don't know how they're doing.
First name Din. Yeah, Din Grogu. Yeah. Yep. With everything going on in MLW, I mean, there's a huge show. Alex Kane has kind of come on and become like a main event player.
Yeah.
We saw him, if you follow MLW, I mean, you really saw him progress into like a main event player. So tell us about the big show in Philly on the 8th.
Yeah, July 8th, Alex Kane gets his first world title shot against a guy that's held a title in some form or some way since June 1st, 2019, Alex Hammerstone. Alex Hammerstone was the inaugural national openweight champion. He won that in Milwaukee, which was a live special on BN Fury Road in 2019. It was also the same night Sami Callihan and Jim Cornette had their fun, which was an interesting day at the office for me. And since that point, he then merged the titles, won the world title in 21 against Fatu. And he's just been, it's 15, 16 title defenses in, and he's just slayed everyone. Now he's got Kane, who just won the Riot, which you can check out for free on YouTube or on Fight Plus. And so I think it's a great match. It's Alex versus Alex, and they have a lot of similarities, both being former national champions, both winning the Battle Riot. And I think it's a fun, fascinating fight. I think the card, I know in the card, I see it right here. I can't turn my camera to show it to you because there's some stuff and surprises, but our Never Say Never card is going to be a stacked one. We're excited to kick off this thing, Fight Plus, Philadelphia, July 8th, and be a monthly, part of their offerings. And there'll be more coming on that card. It's going to be a stacked card.
Real quick, can you say anything? I know we're running out of time, but can you say anything about the WWE lawsuit, or no, you can't talk about
You're
it?
trying to get me into trouble. I mean, I'll say this. There's really not going to be any news on this, I guess, until midsummer. But it's a process, and so part of it is, the judge had the right to just dismiss the case and say peace out. What he did is he said, you need to beef up some of these aspects of your case. Please resubmit, which I thought was an encouraging sign. I'm no lawyer; I just play one on MLW TV, and my name is Court. But it's something that you say, okay, then we hopefully we did our job, and he asked us to resubmit our homework. We did, and hopefully we've satisfied his needs to move forward. And if we move forward, I am sharpening my fork and knife for discovery.
Nice, love it. Before we let you go, let everybody know where they can find MLW social media and otherwise.
You can find us at MLW on Twitter. We are, I believe, verified, but I have no idea. We're on Instagram at Major League Wrestling, YouTube at MLW, and Fight Plus. You can fire it up and get us and binge all day long on us. And MLW.com, the world of MLW. Oh, there I go. The world of MLW never stops. See, I'm the one. I'm the problem. I didn't even realize it, guys. I got to do better than that.
I was an old school podcast subscriber, so we'll always lean back on that.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're working and developing a new podcast. I don't know when that will kick off, but that is something we have in the works for 23. I have no idea who's going to host it yet, but we're working on it. It won't be me.
All right, awesome. But Court, thank you so much for all the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey guys, thank you so much for spending Friday with me. I appreciate having me on.
Thanks. Enjoy the weather.
Thank you, Court. All right, Lavi, let's hit the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com.
Follow me on Twitter, LavieMarg, LAVIEMARG. Check out my long-form articles on LionCubJobSearch.com and check out our LinkedIn group, a unique group, The Business of the Business, the pro wrestling industry.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.